Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to take a look at the anatomy of a unit in command modern operations. Now there's been a couple questions lately, actually a couple questions a little while ago too, that were kind of asking what actually is being stored with a particular unit, and like what are the different details, and what do you really mean by a mount, and what do you really mean by a weapon entry, and things like that. What is a data link, what is communications, what does it mean it has a hanger, what kind of support structures, and there's really a lot that goes into each one of the units. And now without opening up the database and scaring everybody, we'll kind of go over the basics today, as well as how you can use LUA to kind of understand what's going on with a specific unit. So normally when you pick on a unit and you go run up to the database entry here, you get this kind of lovely page which gives you all sorts of useful details. You get your description. Again, we've talked about the database before. You get some general data. I always call this like fluff. And then, of course, you get down to the sensors in EW. Now, the sensors in EW, which makes things a little bit complicated, come in two general types. The first type would be a single sensor, such as a guy with binoculars. The other one would be a sensor group. Now, the reason that gets kind of interesting is when you go ahead and open up the sensors page, if you're in kind of our view here, you can look side by side at the two different systems. And looking at this side is basically going to be telling you where the sensor is looking and kind of its general capabilities, while looking on this side is going to tell you which one's turned on. As you can see, I picked a very complex model intentionally for this particular purpose. Now, once you get past the sensors, you make your way down a little bit further here, you get to the mounts. Now, mounts are an interesting concept because a mount is not necessarily a weapon. Think of a mount as hands and the weapon as the weapon. Now, for example, if I run over here real quick to weapons and actually click on this, you will see all these different things. And you probably notice in the upper left corner this word mount. This is the actual mount for the weapon. It's not the physical weapon itself. Now, if I grab something such as our little machine guns, which you can see side by side, you will notice that the actual gun attached to the mount is this 12.750 cal, basically a machine gun. And you can see that when it fires a burst, and you get 10 of those before we have to do a reload. Now, the important thing to note is that this actual mount contains potentially more than one type of weapon. Now, for example, if I run down here to skip the server box for a second here to the VLS system, you will see that it has a wide variety of different weapons. Remember, the mount holds the thing, the weapon record is the thing. So if I come down here, you can see side by side the difference between our Mark 41 VLS as far as what it describes versus what you see when you look at the actual weapons themselves. Now, this is all going to be very, very important in a minute when we open up the LUA console and dive in a little bit deeper. So now that you understand that, scrolling down, you'll see our magazines. And again, we'll take a look at our magazines side by side. This will be another component. Again, we've got no cargo or anything to confuse us or anything like that. But one of the things we can do is we can store all sorts of weapons here. And you can actually see, again, this is our general description. This is our specific description. We've got plenty of 50 cal ammo, as you can see right here. Now, at the very, very bottom, we've got your comms, your data links, your aircraft facilities. Now, these, of course, are going to line up with everything that you see over here. So, for example, if I click on comms, you can see a list of my data links and my comms. Now, comms, fortunately, are one of the simplest things that they have in here. They've definitely made this a little bit easier for us. Basically, you have the type and what it is, and it tells you whether or not it's operating. Of course, this isn't relevant to us over in kind of the consumer edition, but keep in mind, if we were talking to like a missile or something like that, we would have to be using our Link 14, Link 16, Link 4 kind of a thing to talk to it. Now, the cool thing with comm devices is if you wanted to ever increase capability, you can come down here and add comm device and go nuts kind of a thing. So at this point, you should have a pretty good idea sort of how these two things line up. Now, the reason we're really doing this today is what happens when we want to open this up with LUA. So I'm going to run up to the LUA script console here. You can see it's all nice and empty. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a printout of the details of this particular unit in the event that I wanted to write a script, for example, to change it. And the way I'm going to do this is real simple. First, I'm going to go ahead and create myself a really, really basic variable called unit. This variable, of course, let me see if I can make that bigger for you folks. There we go, a little better. And we're going to use a special command called getUnit. So all I'm going to do is type in sendEdit _ get unit left parenthesis. Now, this particular thing takes a list. It's actually very interesting how LUA handles it. I write a lot of programs and do computer science and everything. This is different. But basically what we're going to do is use a squiggly bracket, and we're going to create a list of ways to describe our interested unit. So in this case, we can describe it a couple different ways. We can describe it by its name or its GUID. So for me, I'm just going to use its name because I know there's only one that has this particular name in the world. So I'm simply going to type in side equals, and of course I only have one side today, is blue, comma, and all we're going to do now is use unit name equals, and we're going to get the name of the unit. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to press R, Control C, press OK, Control V, just like that. Let's go ahead and expand this a little bit. You can obviously see the benefit of naming your things a little bit simpler here. So go ahead and toss a quote on there. We'll close our squiggly bracket. We'll close our right parenthesis. And I'm going to press run to make sure nothing explodes. Good, nothing exploded. That's a good sign. Now what we're going to do is we're going to print this unit. So I'm going to type in print. I'm going to type in unit. Now, when I run, you're going to get all sorts of goofy stuff up here, which is actually going to be very fascinating because it's going to give you all the critical details of that specific unit. Unfortunately, they don't let us get this bigger. Can I make this bigger? Oh, come on. This is the part that you actually need to see. So what you see here is you can see the type, subtype, the name, the size, the GUID in case I needed to reference it later. It gives you the full class. It's going to give you the proficiency, latitude, longitude, altitude, heading, speed, throttle, auto-detectable, mounts, magazines, unit state, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason this is so incredibly useful is because we're actually getting not a random single object, but we're actually getting a list of details out of this unit. Now, the reason that's so helpful is we can actually use that as a way to read out specific things. For example, I noticed that we have this thing. This is mounts, and this is 26. It doesn't do us any good. What if I wanted to print out the specific mounts? Well, you could do that. So if I come up to where my line 2 is here, I can do unit.mounts. Now, if I press the run command, wham, you will see that it prints out every single mount we have here. Now, when you look up here at the tippy top, you can see clearly mount GUID. It gives you the individual IDs of it. It gives you the weapon IDs. But the critical thing is, and this is true when people are running with a lot of LUA scripts, is they need specific numbers, specific IDs. And that's where these special IDs are. And the nice thing is they will always list them by what they are. So if I know, for example, my little 15 caliber mount right here, I can see that its DBID is 561, and I can tell you the weapons are a list of weapons, including the weapon default, which is weapon 10. Here's the maximum cap. That's how much I can carry, basically. There's the name of the weapon. There's its database ID. There's its type. And, of course, you can work your way all the way down here. You can see how incredibly useful that can be for the purposes of changing these items. Now, if I wanted to, for example, come in here and type in magazines, if I were to run this instead, you can see it's going to list everything that we're carrying. And obviously, this is going to be a rather complicated little piece here, and there's a lot of different things. Now, LUA's got an interesting little quirk. Now, if I wanted to spit out a specific one of these magazines, perhaps I want to spit out the third one, we're going to treat it just like you're using a list in like a C or a Python. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go ahead and toss in a bracket, and I'll type what item I want. Now, one of the obnoxious things here is if I do item 0, which would be the instinctive item for me, if I were to press the run key here, you'll notice it says nil. And the reason it says nil is because LUA does this as a list, we don't actually have an item 0, which feels wrong. We have an item 1. So if we're actually to change this to number 1 and hit run again, you'll observe that it gives me only that specific item, which makes it much, much, much easier to go ahead and divide this. Now, one of the really cool things you could do here is you could come up with a little script real fast to print these out a little neater. Hey, let's do that. Let's see what we can do here. So let's create ourselves a really simple for loop here. I'll do for KV and I pairs. And remember the unit, we're not using the unit, we're going to be using the mounts. So if I just come in here and type in mounts, type in do, and all we have to do now is we just have to print V. Now there's a 50-50 chance I got this backwards. Let me try it. Oh, I got it right. First time. So if you take a look here, you can see here that it prints each one of these mounts as a nice, neat item. And you can see one at a time, so it's much, 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 much easier to read as far as trying to identify the specific details of that. Now, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and change this so it's not just the unit mounts. It also could do the unit. If I wanted to change this real quick, I could come in here and say unit.weapons. Now, if I run this like this, you'll see that it'll go ahead and freak out on me because we do not have a unit.weapons. We have a unit.mounts. My bad. Sorry about that. Let's run that one real quick. There we go. So we can see the mounts. If I wanted to see the magazines, I can come in here and do magazines just like that. And you can see it breaks it all down for you very neatly for those of you who are using LUA for the purposes of grabbing these things. Enjoy.